something, and it's a follow-up from last week's message when you all wrote in and we asked for some feedback and some questions regarding relationships, regarding family, regarding children, child raising. And one of the regular questions had to do with communication. And I thought, well, let's add a piece in here about communicating. Because at times, it just doesn't seem like we communicate. It could be between spouses. It could be parent to child. It could be with friends. We want to communicate. We have every intention of communicating. But something seems to get in the way. Something seems to sort of break us down along the way. And I'll tell you, if you add the emotions and the pressures of marriage, child raising, family dynamics, your job, friends, church, the truth of the matter is it don't come easy. And it may seem a bit like mission impossible for us to actually make communications happen, right? I mean, we can talk, and we certainly tell people and others what we want to have happen, but communications happen when we talk and the person on the other end gets it. You ever played that little game where I was going to do it today, where you start a message in the back? Could be the boo dog, ate some green food last Thursday. And if you take that message and pass it all the way forward, sooner or later, it was a guy with a cat, who found it in the parking lot, had a good day. I mean, that'll be the message that comes because we don't hear necessarily everything in the way it's communicated. We hear it the way we want to hear it. And with that comes this trouble. And another piece of communication is this issue of trust. I told you my story. I mean, our story, Novi and I, the night before we were getting married, back in 1981, we'd just gone to a dinner for, the rehearsal dinner. We had one too, a little Chinese restaurant in Hawaii, in Honolulu, where we were living. And I dropped her off at her apartment, her mother's apartment, about 10 o'clock. And she looks at me in the car, my Volkswagen Thing. That was a bad car. Oh, gosh. She looks, worst car purchase of my life. She looks at me and she says, Ben, we're getting married tomorrow. I said, yes. Isn't that good? My parents are here. Everybody's in town. And she said, in my life, the men in my life have not necessarily been really good at follow through. My mom and dad split up when I was young. You know what? And I got to ask you, how do I know I can trust you to not do the same? I was worried about getting to the church on time, finding my clothes that I was going to wear to go to the honeymoon. And she's asking me, but can I trust you? And so I punted and I said, well, it's your problem. I said it in a very nice way, though, that you had a trust challenge, but I'm going to do everything I can to prove that I am trustworthy. But, at the end of the day, so communications has a trust factor. We don't necessarily trust each other because when the chips are down, we're going to kind of take our side and we're going to be a little bit self-protective. So there's all kinds of obstacles that are in the way of us communicating and having it be effective, to say nothing about what do we do with children that we want to communicate to. What do we do with older children that already have a family or have lives and you've got something to say? You try that one on for size, right? How's that one work for you? Because you can have great intentions and it may not happen. So there's a bunch to deal with here because we just don't seem at times to communicate for a host of reasons. And today, I want to take a look at why that is. And I think as we might suspect, that Jesus had some answers because he knew how he built this. This communication was going to be very important in living a rich, abundant life. So he has given us some tracks to run on, and we're going to do our best to run on them today. So we just don't seem to communicate. Let's find out why and see what we can do as we follow his way. Let's pray. Lord, today as we gather with all of our individual lives, we ask you to help us understand more about this subject, why it's so hard at times, how we can break through, and what do we need to do to change, because change don't come easy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, we know what's easy, and that is to miscommunicate, right? I mean, we've done it. How many of you have miscommunicated? Anybody Thank you very much for my friends. You know, and by the way, you are not the first people to miscommunicate. We are not the first people. In fact, there is a great story in the book of Joshua. If you turn to Joshua chapter 22, if you have your Bible, Joshua chapter 22, there is a great story. I'm going to tell it and then read a little bit of it. But it is about what can happen when misunderstanding, miscommunication goes south. It can turn into a very, very hostile situation. So let me set the scene for you. Israel, the 12 tribes that make up the family called Israel, if you are newer to the faith, there's a man named Jacob whose name got changed to Israel, and he had 12 sons. So those 12 men became the fathers, if you will, of 12 different families, and they make up what was the first clan of Israel, if you will, which became the Jewish nation. So these 12 tribes finally made their way into the promised land. Remember Moses crossing the Red Sea, spent 40 years in the desert. Finally, Joshua is the one who leads them across. And they come in, they conquer the people that are in the promised land. In fact, here's a picture of it right here. They conquer this area right here. There's Jerusalem. There is Shiloh, which is where this event is taking place, all the conversation. Here's the Jordan River. Flows between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. Actually, it goes this way. And here's Jordan, and this is where 3 of the tribes have their home of the 12 families, and 9 of them have homes over here. So that's the setup. So the story goes this way. The 12 tribes have done well. Joshua, who's the leader, says, it's time for those 3 tribes that live on the other side, for them to be released from fighting, from being part of the group that secured the promised land. And the land that God had given them was on the east side of the Jordan, this side over here. This is West Jordan, kind of the East Bank, West Bank, you've heard of that. So, to the east. And so, as they were headed across, they got a little bit, play it by ear. They said, you know what? As we head over, our brothers on the other side and families might not remember us. You ever have someone move away and you try to remember them and you just get busy with life and all of a sudden you realize it's been 3 or 4 years and you haven't written them, haven't called them? Well, before there were cell phones and the U.S. Mail Service, these folks, when they left and crossed the Jordan River, which was only probably a 10 or 12 mile journey from where they were, still, it was a long way because you walked. So as they began to get near the Jordan River, they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build an altar. Essentially, we're going to build a memorial. And the memorial is to remind our 9 brother families that anytime they get near this river, they remember that the rest of their family lives on the other side. Kind of a nice idea, right? They're going to have a family reunion, need to know where everybody is, and that they would never forget that the people on that side of the river, 100 years from now, are part of our family. Seems reasonable, right? Seems reasonable. The only problem was that just on the other side, in the middle of this whole event, there's some events that took place. One of them was that the nation of Israel, a number of the men, got seduced by some foreign gods, and they began to, at a place called Peor, they began to have relations with these temple prostitutes, and the result was that God judged the entire nation. Sounds a little bit like the coronavirus. 24,000 of them got a plague, and they died. I mean, that's a plague, right? So everybody remembered that. Everybody remembered that. And part of it was disobedience. So that God punished the nation in this case. Well, they got the message, and when they saw their brothers, the 3 tribes, go over and build an altar, they thought they were building an altar in defiance of God. They didn't understand the motives of their brothers. And as a result, they began to prepare for war. Now, this is a family, and they're going to war. So they all bivouac here in Shiloh, right? The other tribes have moved over here, and 9 of these family groups are deciding they're going to war. Thank God cooler heads prevailed, and a group went forward and met with the leaders of these 3 tribes that are on the east and said, wait, what are you guys doing? You know we're not supposed to build altars. And they said, no, you misunderstand. We're not building an altar to worship the Lord. We're building an altar as a memorial. Verse 27. It will remind our descendants and your descendants that we too have the right to worship the Lord at his sanctuary with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings. You remember the movie? It was all about this. Indiana Jones, remember the Lost Ark? Yeah, they made a movie of this where the ark was found. Remember? You guys saw the movie. Okay, good. But that real ark was where the temple, was where the worship happened, and only there. And they built this memorial so that nobody would forget that we understand that. So no misunderstanding would happen. What happened when they tried to get a plan to have no misunderstanding? What did they get? Misunderstanding. Isn't that good? That's what human beings are about, right? He says, then your descendants will not be able to say to our descendants that we have no claim to the Lord. Isn't that fascinating? They were ready to go to war. They were ready to literally end the lives of their brothers and sisters. He said, we're not trying to do anything other than just make a memorial. And the result was that until it was diffused, until there was some understanding, until both sides started talking to each other, they were going to go to war. And I thought, isn't that just exactly the problem we have with communications? Because it's this: context, background, and events and distrust can fuel a range of bad reactions. How many of you have gotten an argument over context? Right? You didn't understand exactly what. How about background events? Oh, I thought you were doing that. I didn't understand. And distrust can fuel a range of reactions. One of the things that happens, it probably happens to people in other churches, but we become people that, in times, as men and women, that we think we know your motive. We know each other's motives. Have you noticed that? Married people try this for a while. Oh, I know what you're feeling. Yeah, say that 3 or 4 times and see how much fun you're going to have for the next week. Because you don't know what I'm feeling. You don't know what your wife's feeling, really. You think you do. But you get wiser and you say, honey, how do you feel about that? Would be a better question rather than a telling, right? Because we don't have the ability to read minds. And that is a problem with relationships. We think we really do have the ability to understand what your motives are and what my motives are from a distance. And that's a bad strategy for communications because we don't. We can get it wrong. We can get it wrong over and over and over again. Proved it with the Israelites. Those of you who've been around a while, you've probably proved it in your own life and in your own family. Because what's true here is this: if you're going to communicate, everybody has a wall. Everybody presents a wall to communications. And you either got to go through it, knock it down, or you got to go over it for communication to happen. Because we see things through the grid of our lives. We see things through our experiences, through our context, through our background. One group didn't know the other group was still really upset and concerned about any disobedience was going to cause another plague. And that colored the reaction of the whole crew. So communications are not simple, but they need to happen. We need to be effective at it. And they're the way that we really do love each other in a powerful way. And when it comes to the important relations in your life, it will take extra effort to keep your love from getting lost in the fog of real life. Because that's what happens. Life speeds up. If you take it from the moment of let's say, for instance, in a marriage, you're standing there at the altar, I do, and you think, boy, life's really complicated. Whew, we finally get here to the altar. I do. And after that, there's sort of a fog bank that slowly starts to creep in because life gets faster. It gets more complicated. And the freedom and the joy of, saying, oh, I love you too. Let's just sit here for a while and cuddle. Let's just, I love you more. No, I love you more. No, I love you more. comes, hey, look, I gotta be downtown. Can you pick up the laundry? Sure. And by the way, on your way, would you pick up some food for dinner tonight? Oh, sure, you bet. And you get it all done, you forget the whole thing. What does that do? Well, it just messed up dinner. So how are we doing? How are we doing now, right? How's this communication thing going, right? Because the fog of real life wrecks communication. It makes it more difficult to pull off. So it's going to take some extra effort, or otherwise your love will get lost. Your attempts to communicate will never connect. And that's a problem with marriage. It's a problem with friends. It's a problem with children. We had a lot of questions last week that were about what do you do with dealing with an older child, younger child, some jealousy in the family. What do you do in terms of helping your kids deal with screen time? I'm going to give you some thoughts here as we move along. But starting with husbands and wives, Peter writes this about how the relationship has some needs that need to be cared for first. He said this about husbands and wives. He said, in the same way, first he talked to wives and he said, you need to learn how to be partners with your husband, how to learn to get on his team, how to really be in sync with him. And then he says it's in the same way. You husbands, so here's your responsibility, husbands. You must give honor to your wives, treat them carefully, honor them, give them value, and then treat your wife with, there's our word, understanding. And if there's one word that probably men need to learn about in marriage early is understanding. Because you're so different. Your wife is so different than you are. You are so different than her. Your needs, your appetites, your abilities, your ability to process. Most of us understand, but, men are very single-minded. I was talking with a guy in the first service, if your goal is to change the oil today in your car, you're going to oil changers, and you're going to change your oil. No, they're going to change your oil, but you're going to go, right? And you get hey, can you stop by? No, I have to go get the oil changed. I'm getting the oil changed, man. I'm getting the oil changed, Got to get it done. So you go get the oil changed, and then after the oil is changed, you're ready for opportunity and interest number 2, right? Whereas a woman, oil change the kids, empty this, make that, tidy this up. I got to call Susie. I got to make this. The idea of keeping all those things in play is normal. So we're going to have to learn, guys, how to understand how your mate operates. Or we're going to make demands or we're going to push things in her direction that don't connect with her. And then we wonder why we're not communicating. So learn to understand. You need to ask questions of your wife. You need to sit down with her over a meal with nobody else around. Get a babysitter. And tell me about how you're feeling about things. Tell me about where I maybe rub you a little bit the wrong way. Help me understand. Because I love you. I want to do things right. I want to understand. Would any of you ladies mind your significant other, your guy, to say, would you help me understand? Is that a negative thought? Thank you. I was hoping it wasn't. You messed my whole message up if it was. But right? Because you ask him permission. Help me, understand. And the idea is to do it so that you can live together as you do. That she may be weaker physically, right? But she's your equal partner in God's gift of life. Treat her as you should so your prayers will not be hindered. Ouch. So maybe my glossing over things, moving too fast, too often, riding roughshod, just getting on to things means that my prayers, God will get our attention so we understand. So husbands, you got to love your wife by working to understand her. Very important stuff. Basic kind of understanding 101 for husbands. But for wives, quickly, so again I say, as Paul writes here about this subject, he said, each man must love his wife as he loves himself. So good understanding of what that means. And he says, and the wife must what? Respect her husband. Now, just like love is to be unconditional, so is respect for your husband. You say, well, wait a minute. There's times when my guy isn't doing stuff that makes him as respectful or make me as respectful. That isn't the point that Paul the Apostle is trying to make. He says, no. Just like you want to be loved even when things aren't going, this isn't your best day. He's saying, wives, love your husbands by respecting them. Because you will help him do his best work if you learn to respect who he is and if you connect with what matters to him. So this is a very basic piece of what communications, where it starts. It starts way back here. And here's how it works. Here's how you improve your communication besides getting a bullhorn, which doesn't work, by the way. Here it is. We change our goal from being heard, because that's what we've done oftentimes, right? We want to be heard. I want you to hear what I got to say. So I'm going to say it fast, loud, and often. No, in God's economy, we change, if we want to communicate, we change our goal from being heard to hearing what others are telling us. We got to put on what James says is the new attitude. We've got to become slow to speak, if you will, and quick to what? Listen. Listen. We've got to tune in. We've got to care enough to say that it matters what you think. So I'm going to take the time. I'm going to go through whatever it takes so that you're listening. So that you hear. So that, try that again. So that I hear and then I meet you where you're at, because until you open that line of communication, until you break down whatever walls are there, until you scale over them, there's no communication. There's orders given. There's, yeah, I got that. You ever had that response? Yeah, I got that. What does that mean? I don't got nothing. I don't care. I don't like the way you talk to me. So there. Yeah, I got that, right? That's, go away. You don't, yeah, buzz out. You haven't communicated anything other than make me mad. Right? So this communication thing is very important. It goes right along with love. Is if we're going to love, we've got to find a way to connect. So James says, look, if you're going to do this right, he says, you want to be quick to listen, slow to speak, right? So listen, and slow to get angry. And if you've been a parent for any time, you know that, man, you say it once, you say it twice, the 14th time, you've raised your voice. You got veins popping out on your head sometimes, and you're trying not to get really angry, but you're, come on, man, I want you to do it now. Come on, little one. And so we've got to find a different way if we're going to live and function as listeners, as really good listeners. And Jesus knew this was a huge problem. Look at this passage from that standpoint. He knew we would struggle with listening because we're self-centered people. We can't help it. It's part of being human. When we become Christians, we get a new nature, but we're still human. There's a part of us that defaults to, I want what I want when I want it. And it fights against our communication effort. And Jesus said this, I know this. Listen to how you can begin to become a better listener. He says, why do you worry about the speck in your friend's eye? What does that mean with regard to listening? Why are you so quick to want to tell everybody else what's wrong with them? Or point out their weakness? Or tell them what you want? He says, why are you so quick to do that when you have some obvious poor habits? You have some obvious shortcomings at home in your own life. He used the idea of a log in your own life. He said, you wouldn't try to do eye surgery on somebody when you got a 2x4 hanging out your left eye, right? That would just not, you got that vision? That wouldn't work. He says, how can you say to your friend, let me help you get rid of your problem when really you're full of them in a sense? He says, first, he used the word hypocrite. I don't like that word. So we just gloss over it. No, he says, hey, listen, if you want to move in the right direction, don't be a hypocrite. He says, first, get rid of the log in your own eye. Why? So that you can see. So get rid of the blockage in your own ears so you can hear. And then you'll be able to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Now you'll be able to communicate, but you got to hear first. You've got to deal with this listening issue. It is powerful. In fact, any time in the Bible where it says you're a fool, I always think of somebody else. But he says, look, if you're not going to be a listener, here's what happens. He says, fools have no interest in understanding, right? They only want to air their own opinions. Anybody live that way? Yeah, that's our normal way of thinking. He says that wouldn't be smart. That's not the way Jesus designed communications for his followers to be about. So how do you do it? How do you build, or how do you improve your communications? Well, it starts right here. Learn the love language of every person you plan to build closeness with. Now, obviously, this means, if you take your Christmas card list, there's 300 people on there, you may not have it dialed in for all 300. But I think if you look at your immediate family and the people and your friends that you're close with, that it is not that hard for you to understand what ways do they like to be communicated with. Because there are ways that communicate and there are ways that push away. Have you noticed that? You have preferences. And by the way, because God made us all different. This is part of the uniqueness. So there is a number of ways that you hear love. And there's some ways that love's coming at you and you don't hear it because you're not tuned into it. They're not speaking your love language. And if we're going to be close, we've got to take the effort, I think, to become people that really learn how to love extremely well. Because that's the way we're going to begin to listen and prove to people that we are. And then, as they feel valued, as they feel that their heart is being heard, that their life is being valued, guess what happens next? They start wanting to hear and want to know what you would like for them to know, because they know you love them. It is a powerful way to change the dynamic. Let's look at a couple of these relationships. Let's start with your spouse. Let's start in a marriage relationship. So you need to get on target ASAP. That means as soon as possible. You want to get on target. I would hope, and today we're gonna give you a little test. So how many of you know your own love language? So, and I'm going to talk about what you know. So what's your love language, Nikki? Words of affirmation and quality time. So if you want to approach my friend Nikki in a way that she goes, whoa, you care about me right out of the bat. So you could compliment her. You could say something about her, the valuing her as in her mission and role. The fact that she did a great job with the announcements and the introduction and prayer list today, right? And at words of affirmation, you're affirming that you love her and you're telling her why. That's powerful, right? And that happens to be mine. Mine is words of affirmation. If you said, Ben, hey, listen, here's a present. I say, thank you. Who doesn't want a present? That's really cool. But when you say, Ben, I got so much out of the message today, and man, in this point, it just did me. I'm going, really? Tell me about it. Tell me about it, right? Tell me about it. Tell me what you got out of it. It was pretty good, huh? A little turn of phrase. We kind of put it on there. You like the skit? Because that's how my portal somehow is open, and it floods in and it touches my heart. My wife, Novia, her love language is touch, her primary one, right? So you've probably been touched by her. She loves to touch. We go on a trip, and we've been coast to coast and at conferences and things. My wife has hugged her way across the United States. She has hugged every pastor in America that we've been close to. Bill Hybels was speaking somewhere. She went up and hugged him. They cried together for a while. And then Rick Warren was at the Naval Academy. We had to wait around. My wife hugged Rick Warren because she said, I want to hug him. So she hugged him, and they cried together for a while. And I'm going, okay, all right. I don't know if I take that personally, if that's a problem. No, but it's the way she demonstrates and shows, thank you, darling, and shows that love means something, so touch, hugely impactful. So when you're loving someone the way they want to be loved, what happens? They're now listening because you're listening to them. And you're coming through the porthole, if you will, communicating in a way that really works in their life. I wrote down a few things here. We're going to talk about kids and friends real quickly. But let's talk about spouses for just a moment. So words of affirmation. Or this just says, I love you and want you to know why I do. Hey, you did a great job with setting up today. You did a great job with providing what you provided. Thank you for that. You're essential to this event. I so appreciate. And what that says is you recognize me. You care about me, to the person who's wired that way. Now, all of these, right? We could use all 5 of these, and probably you'd say, hey, that's pretty loving. But there's probably one that these words, these actions come through, and you say, that hits the spot. That hits the spot. So I'm saying, so you need to know your own, and then you surely ought to know the love language of your spouse. And here again, if this is still nebulous, this is a great opportunity to go to dinner, go to breakfast, go to lunch, go anywhere, get alone and say, tell me how you like to be loved. And it may be a little awkward at first, but I think you'll get there, and you'll you'll know how the person you care for the most in this world, how they receive love the best. Wouldn't it be sad that we spend a lifetime together? We've been married 39 years this year. That we've spent, let's say, 38 of those missing each other. Maybe I say, I'm giving her presents, man. Because that's it's what I think is important. So I'm giving her presents. And she's going, well, that's nice, but if you just hold my hand and communicate that you love me, that's what really lets me know. But I didn't know that, so I'm hard-headed. I'm just, our house is starting to get filled up with Amazon boxes, right? Because I am just all over that. But that doesn't necessarily wind her clock. It certainly fills our house up, but it doesn't wind her clock, right? So this is very important stuff, because there are things in marriage that you need that you need to communicate that are not always going to be easy. And you want to have a bunch of goodwill in the bank, right? So that when time comes, that you have a conversation that's serious, that it isn't pushed away, it's embraced, because your partner knows it comes from a place of love. Because you've been so careful. You've been so thoughtful. This is powerful stuff. This is what makes love relationships so important and critical, is that you know one another. And you've taken the time to do it. Now communication happens. Quality time. I give my spouse my undivided attention. That means you turn the computer off. Men, you turn ESPN off. You put your phone on hold, off, throw it in a bucket of water, whatever you have to do. So he or she knows that you want just their face directed to your face, your eyes on them, and you communicate. Undivided attention, man. And if you're a multitasker, if you're, fidgety, that's hard to do. But that's what loving them this way, and it might be you, what's needed. Receiving gifts. I love the thoughtfulness and the effort you go through to give me a gift, right? My daughter Annie, she, just talking about children, she is kind of bent that way. So, you can praise her. She says, thank you. You can do stuff for her. That's great. But if you buy her a gift, she goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Dad. Thanks for thinking of me. Ooh, she really turns on with that idea that our relationship gets closer because I come through the porthole, if you will, that she needs me to touch that area of her life. Acts of service, right? You try to ease the burdens of the one you love. Right? It's not just doing dishes because they're your dishes and her dishes. It's not just her dishes. You're helping men. Girls, it's not just clean up the garage. That's a wonderful thing. But acts that you relieve some of the burden. I can think of tax time coming up. Is that a burden for anybody? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, relieve each other's burden. Figure out a way. Maybe there's a way you can relieve, if this is where your loved one is kind of, positioned, find a way to ease that burden. It could be cleaning something. It could be doing an errand. There's lots of ways. And physical touch. It provides a personal reassurance of my love for you. So all of these ways are very personal, but you have to know them, right? You have to get down to that level of saying, how does it work for you? Because when you're listening, you'll find out. And when you move that way, now communication can happen. Now we can talk about anything. So, so who's responsible in the marriage? Who's the primary responsible one? It was a great question in a marriage. Well, we're both responsible. The Bible says submit to one another. No. I mean, at the end of the day, who gets the good news or the bad news? Who's in charge? Well, the order of things in the Bible is clearly that the man is the head of the house. What that means is he's going to be held accountable for what doesn't happen well and praised for what does. So at some point, and a man would be crazy if he didn't consult his wife and you didn't work this thing out together. But yeah, there's a pecking order at the end of the day if things became down to a push or a shove. But love says, no, let's work this out together, right? And if we're communicating, man, we can deal with so much. Powerful to know and understand. He says, in the same way, right, you husbands must give honor to your wives so that your prayers won't be hindered. Secondly, your kids. Let's do this quickly with your kids. How does love language work with your kids? Well, I think in a similar way. Number two, with your kids, start listening for real. In other words, start listening to what it is that is connecting with them. Utilize the bridge that their love language reveals to make inputs into their world. Because you're going to have to say a lot of things to your kids. Right? Besides just, get your hands off the table. Stop eating with your fingers. Stop hitting your sister, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen. Now, here's some ideas. Before you tell them anything, love them, listen to them, start listening. Words of affirmation. They go to school and they get torn down. You went to school. Remember how cool it was to go to school? They make a nickname for you. It's never a nice nickname. Even remember that? They usually take some weakness. I was Benny the Bouncer because I was a little rounder guy then, and it wasn't like I was great at basketball. It's because I bounced when I walked. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. I probably told you too much. But so you value them when you use words of affirmation. See how they react. My grandson Luke, when you begin to affirm him and you begin to show him by words and the compliments how much you love him in that manner, boy, he starts to respond. He gets closer. He gets quiet. He wants you to do more. Quality time. Leave work early. Pick them up and spend a day with your son or daughter. It's going to cost you. You're going to get behind at work. It's going to, driving down the freeway in the middle of the day. But by so doing, you take that child that says, you matter to me so much, and I'm going to take my hard-earned time I should be, and I'm going to spend it with you because I need to. And now when you have something to say, they know that you understand them. And when you give them advice now, they're pretty sure that you understand where they're coming from and they're willing to listen. Powerful. Receiving gifts. I think all of our kids like getting gifts. But it's some more than others, right? Acts of service. You probably help them with homework. Maybe there's a way you can help them learn a skill. Something that they need that is uniquely for them. I find all our grandkids that were in that time of life, that they like their brothers, but they don't like their brothers. They bug each other because they're together all the time. And they love to be a part. That, if you do something individual, it makes, you can see how it just makes them perk up. Acts of service, lifting burdens, physical touch. Powerful ways to start communicating. And when you have something hard to say, you've loved them. And it gives a right for you now to come back the other way. Because you can yell at them. You can just yell louder and talk louder and louder. And you will build walls rather than break through them, rather than go over them. The walls just get taller, right? It's how communication really happens. This is a great passage. It says, fathers, don't exasperate your children. The word's exasperation is just don't make it so darn hard for them to succeed. So if you get in sync with their love language, you're helping them succeed. That's the idea. But take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. Show them that God loves them personally. And as a father, as a mother, you do too. You know how they are wired. And you've listened and you've learned. And it makes a deal. And finally, with friends, I want to go a different direction with friends because you need to learn their love language, certainly, and to use it. But on the other hand, with friends, you want to enjoy what they bring. So if you're going to be a friend and you have friends, if you say, my love language is touch, and my friends don't touch me that much, and they don't, reassuring a hug or a touch or, a high five, they're not into that so much. They're into more gifts and stuff, and we go places. But not much touch. What we have to do as friends in our love growing is that we're really willing to accept love from a whole multiplicity of directions from our friends. We become good receivers of love, right? I mean, a gift, thank you. I know it's, they love me. Words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, quality time, all of that. I open myself up to their way of loving. In fact, it's a beautiful passage here in Romans 12:9. He says, love like your life depends on it here. He says, be good friends who love deeply and practice playing second fiddle. That's just a beautiful way to look at it. The first violin, is the one, the guy or gal out front. And the second fiddle is in the back doing all the harmony, and they're grinding away. He says, play second fiddle and watch your friends enjoy you even more. Sometimes you step back. Take what you get and love and enjoy them in the process. It is a great way to make sure communications can happen. So as we wrap this up, I'll invite the band up. But as we wrap this up, just 3 quick things to think of today. First, communication happens when both you and the one you want to speak with get the real message, right? We're not communicating if we're simply, throwing stuff over the wall. I can't tell you how many times with my kids I thought they understood. And then I watch their actions and I go, they don't understand at all. So I didn't communicate. I told them what needed to be because I'm dad, right? At the end of the day, they're going to end up doing to a degree what they want to within guidelines. And if you want to touch your kids so that you can really have these conversations, I encourage you. If you have kids in this range, if you have adult children, you can have more adult conversations, but it still goes, will you listen to make sure that they get the message? Will you become a great listener? Hear what others are saying before you transmit. And thirdly, become really fluent in love language. I think, if you're going to learn Spanish, French, learn love language. You will be rewarded in your marriage, in your child raising, in your friendships. And people will say, man, is it good to be around them? They know how to love. Jesus said the greatest thing we're ever going to run into is love. You're more like God when you love. That's the means by which he wants to communicate. And if you don't aim it, you're bound to keep missing by a mile. So let's be specific. Let's learn how to love our friends the way they like to be loved. And watch what happens. Let's pray as we close. Lord, easy to say, but certainly now the hard work. And I'll bet you if my friends are thinking like I thought all week, I got a list of things that I need to do better. And I've got some really important love language transmissions to make. And I pray that we learn to understand that is the means you've given us, love, so that our communications would be understood. And we really could make progress. So help us do just that, Lord. May we become people that play second fiddle so that we can make sure our friends are heard, and then we'll make sure that we love them just the way you want us to. So help us, as each of us is unique Each of our kids is unique, that we're going to have to come out them in a unique and a self-styled way. Be with us as we do and give us the courage to do just that. In Jesus' name.